Hello there, and welcome back to the Digital Infusio podcast, where we talk everything innovation and advancement in the field of rehabilitation. And today, I'm super excited because we are going to talk about a therapy that's safe to say is redefining what we think is possible in neurological rehabilitation. And for this, I'm glad to welcome Dr. Omar Ahmad, founder and CEO of NeuroAnimation, to the podcast. Welcome, Dr. Omar.
Thank you, Hamsa.
So first, congratulations on being named as CAS honoree for 2026. That's huge. And as I was saying, I waited 2 years. It was the first time I told you I want to do this chat 2 years ago. But every time I receive a new email and I read a new success story, I feel like that wait is to my advantage because there is a lot to talk about. So before we dive any deeper, I want you to tell me more. What is neuroanimation? Before we talk about results, what is this technology?
Yeah, sure. So we spoke before. I think we opened our clinic doors, or our center, we call it our center doors. It has been 2 years. And I think the extraordinary thing is we didn't expect the level of effects that we saw, which is now what we call our third generation of the technology. So we did a lot of work at Johns Hopkins. I was a faculty member there for 10 years. And what we built, though, after I left and in those 2 years and when we deployed, it pushed recovery boundaries so far beyond what we had expected that it really just exploded the whole thing. And it's growing mostly by just results and word of mouth with clients who have extraordinary gains. So that's kind of the pretext to this conversation. There's lots of nuances to why that is. What we discovered, I think we have a much better understanding of neuroanimation. What is neuroanimation? Neuroanimation is the most effective neuroplastic brain strengthening and recovery platform in existence. There's no comparison with what the results we can achieve versus anything else out there, any form of neurological physical therapy. And the reason why is because we target actual brain growth. And it's been an exciting year for neuroscience because what coincided with our evidence of brain growth was the fact that adult brains do grow new neurons. Now, the mechanisms of how that process affect neuroplasticity are largely a mystery, but everything points to strengthening and bringing back residual functioning online, resolution of problems that people have for years and years and years that we're able to actually address for the first time.
Yeah, and also like for anyone listening, so I would say like neuroanimation is basically a VR platform, right?
No, it's not. It's not a VR
Yeah,
platform.
yeah, that's what
So
I want to hear from
virtual
you.
reality is, people use it. Whether it's virtual reality or in what we call our studios, that's just the mechanism of the display, really. The program is administered in our studios. So they're very, very complicated and they're very expensive to build. And we need to put all that resource into them because of the precision involved. So if you're going to trigger a behavioral intervention in the brain that requires micro movements of the body and integrating all that information in real time, it's very, very difficult to do. We have 12 cameras that track up to your fingertip, all of your joints, millimeter precision at 120 hertz or 240 hertz. So all that rich, fast, dynamic motion capture data is then fed into our computers, which then structure the program to maximize brain plasticity and brain growth. It's not, we have a program for virtual reality that it's more of a supplement that after people leave, most of our clients leave, they see the gains, they want to come back to do more. So it's something that we're able to connect them to our community and connect them to the to the coaches and to even other survivors or other clients. But the delivery is done in the clinic, in the studio. It's not VR. It's more like a holodeck, if you've ever seen Star Trek, right? It's a very complicated room.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm looking for because I think like the word VR does not give it the full advantage, but exactly that's what we see. Like on the surface, we see those sea creatures and like people with the goggles, they're trying to move those creatures with their bodily movement. And so in order for this to happen, you need this complex and complicated like technological support to track those even
Yeah,
tiniest
well, people
movements.
don't use the headset inside the
Okay.
studio, right?
Okay.
The VR headset is something that's done entirely outside of our center. It's an again, it's something that we give clients to help them kind of stay up to date before they get back into the studio. The studio has a massive projector, right? So it's like a movie theater, and then cameras which track, and the cameras are so precise that it's actually higher fidelity than even what Hollywood uses. And Hollywood, they have to stick beads on you. All of ours is markerless. So it's very
Okay.
easy. You just go in and you're tracked, and then you're input into the computers, and then it displays on the screen. The headset part of it is not what we do in our center. The headset is something that's an addition that we give to clients when they go home and between usually their first and second trip to the center.
Yeah. So it's more like a supplementary, but the full experience is a whole immersive
Yeah.
experience. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So let's go back. You talked about being like starting in Johns Hopkins. So my question is, you definitely had a hypothesis then. So in
hmm
order for you to create this and do the study, so what was the initial hypothesis? Like, what were you trying to do? Was it like a regular experiment that showed promising results, or did you have
hmm
any specific hypothesis that you were testing?
Yeah. So when we started at Johns Hopkins, the idea from some of the neurologists was very vague. They just simply wanted to gamify rehab. That was how they put it to me but when I came to the university, I had been studying other things and building other things related to technologies of interaction that were deeper. The basic idea was, okay, how do you engage the brain with movement, right? If you're picking up something, you're not really, or you're repeating a task, a motor task, you're engaging your motor execution side of the brain. Neurological rehabilitation, neuromotor rehabilitation, this is synonymous with neuroplasticity. Okay. And neuroplasticity is synonymous with not motor execution, with motor learning, right? How do you engage new pathways? How do you create new things in the brain? And these are very, very separate things. So the hypothesis, if you go to it's kind of a truism. If you're picking up an object over and over and over again, are you really engaging your brain, right? Or are you just sort of executing something versus, someone asks you to go learn surgery or learn a new type of knitting where you don't really know how to do it and you have to engage your brain to figure that out. So that was the basic hypothesis, that we want to engage the brain with the movement and focus more on motor learning as opposed to motor execution. Now, subsequent to this, there was a lot of research that came out that showed motor repetition actually attenuates motor plasticity and motor plasticity. So you see a lot of myths in the neuro rehab community, like it's repetitions. Like there's some level of importance in activity in general, like you need to be moving and doing things. But the idea that you have an impaired brain and simply trying to pick up an object in an impaired way 1,000 times is going to improve you is completely inaccurate. Not only that, it's probably doing the opposite, right? Because you're attenuating motor learning in plasticity, you're not exploiting it. Whereas if you're told to do hours and hours of concentrated new motor learning, your brain is now activated in a very different way. Its blood is going to it to learn new things. It's looking at new connections. It's looking at synchronicity, right? It's doing so many different things. And so what the hypothesis was in general is we're going to amplify neuroplasticity with movement, not just rely on movement. And the difference is very subtle but very deep. If someone is just kind of doing the action versus having to have this concentrated moment between their brain and the action, and they're never losing sight of that focus, those are characteristically two totally separate things. Now, the industry doesn't have the time to look at it that deeply, but that look is what's the difference between gaining new movement or gaining new neurological function and not. So it's a void in the marketplace that we quickly stepped on because nobody's thinking about it in that way. And there's just too much bloat and dogma to prevent people to start thinking about brain connected to body, not just body.
Yeah, exactly. So like speaking about myths in the field, so there's usually this window that we talk to patients about. So not to point fingers, I am this one. I used to be a clinician, and we used to tell people like that's how we learned and that's how we told patients like we have this window, we have this opportunity, like it's the first weeks after a stroke or after a neurological damage that we are capable to put people back on track, maybe like push a little bit more. And when we see people plateauing and like not showing any improvement, we used to like go back to maintenance, avoiding muscle damage or muscle atrophy as much as we can. Basically, you blew this out. Like the results that are coming, like people after years of stroke,
Yeah.
they are achieving new milestones. So I know you said like it's kind of a mystery, but do you have any kind of explanation to what's going on? So I understand the part of the like pre-motor, like the
Yeah.
learning, not only the execution,
Mm-hmm.
but like what's driving this, do you think?
It's what's driving it is brain growth. So actual brain, brain cell growth. And we have strong evidence of that in a conference proceeding that we did. So just to address your point though about this seeming contradiction or duality between plateaus and early recovery and late recovery. So it's kind of contradictory, but both are true. So one, we've shattered the myth that you have a plateau. We've seen clients who've had AVM, massive impairments 8 years ago, and are now developing pincer movements in their hand that were non-existent. Okay. And we're hyper focused as a company on new movements for stroke clients. We call them clients. It is technically a wellness facility. So it's so low risk and so high reward that there's no reason to go through regulatory red tape. Many of our clients have stroke and come and see these amazing benefits, but it is a wellness offering, not a medical offering. Nevertheless, we've shattered the myth with these clients that there's a plateau to recover. New movement is our biggest thing. We see people having stroke years ago, things just come back online. And then they're able to work on those things and layer them. It's incredible. Like the spectrum we see, about 30% stroke clients. But then we see neurological recovery in all different clients, right? We've had a TBI client who had a massive TBI 5 years ago, traumatic brain injury, was a mute. He couldn't speak at all, zero. And he now can sing and he's spoken clearly words. We've had neuroocular problems and we've had 6 prescription changes on glasses. So people coming in had a neurological injury. They had eye problems that couldn't be resolved. And we've returned them to like 20/20 vision. And this is the ophthalmologist is looking at this right after the program going, what's the difference here? Now, that's not everybody. And we don't have enough evidence to make, a strong claim on that. But so it's anecdotal from our wellness offering, but it's strong enough there's a neuro-optometrist at OSU that saw the connection between hippocampal growth and retinal nerves. And he said, we need to start to study this because these resolutions are very, very, very hard to do. We've seen people who have very, very strong difficulties finding the words to express after brain injury, completely able to do them. We've put people back to work who have had cognitive problems and could not focus. So the idea that, there's a plateau and you're limited is certainly broken with what we do, especially in the cognitive realm. We don't consider ourselves a stroke recovery center anymore. It is just general brain wellness and growth. Now, having that said, the early period of brain recovery, so the sort of the late subacute period, or the early acute period is, I'm not in favor of trying to. I think the body is doing a natural job of getting repair mechanisms in order. And I think there's a danger of overstressing the nervous system in the early acute period, right, where recovery is happening. And I'll get to that in a moment. But in the late subacute, yes, I think that we can, our neuroanimation will enhance the latent, because it's really the same mechanism of action. So you're in the early and late subacute periods after brain injury, your body actually triggers a cascade of chemicals which promote neuronal growth and migration in different regions in the brain. So we've actually seen The evidence shows you have neuronal stem cells that can migrate to damaged areas. What every evidence points, because we grew hippocampal volume, so that's that same area of the brain generating neurons, every piece of evidence shows that what we're doing is activating that even more. So that's what's happening, is we're able to activate that area of the brain in a very unique way, in a very methodical way, and that can enhance it. But back to the early acute period in stroke and neurological disease, I think it's very irresponsible for physicians or scientists to try and give people super high doses like right after injury. I think it's a very flawed idea. It's just not smart. I think patients need rest. So I think within the first 6 months is absolutely important, right? But I think it's more like around month 2 to 4, which is ideal. And all the evidence shows that. But you have a lot of neuroscientists or physicians trying to go after the first week, and I think they're going to fail. I think there's a couple studies showed failure there, but it's like you don't want to overstress during that early period of recovery, but you want to focus on a little bit after where they're healing.
Yeah, so we're not trying to get people like in the first few weeks, very
Probably
early,
like after
subjected
the first
to
month.
yeah,
So
because
post
yeah.
acute, I think the ideal time for a stroke client would be post acute discharge. So
Mhm.
after they leave the earth, we are the best option for them to maximize their recovery.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. Like, there's no need to bring a neuroanimation to the hospital, like right
No,
at
I
the time
don't
of
think
injury.
so. Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
it should be in the hospital acute setting. Even though my alma mater does that, Johns Hopkins, they were doing some general mobility, which is important, right? To get out of bed and to walk around. But the hyper intense dosage we use to achieve the neurological effect, that should be done in the, after about a month. It's still the early subacute period, right? This is now getting into hyper definitions, right? Or acute versus subacute versus late subacute and that sort of thing. But I
Yeah.
think the ideal sweet spot would be, and we're an outpatient type of wellness center, right? This is not an inpatient facility. So the ideal situation is anybody who's being discharged from an inpatient rehab or skilled nursing facility, or, that's the ideal time to just come and do this.
Yeah, so good to know this. And you touched a little bit on the research and on the hypothalamic growth. And I want us like to zoom in a little bit more on specifically the research done by Dr. Michelle Carlson on Alzheimer's, the Oceans study. I was like looking into it, and apparently people are reversing back from uh, some Alzheimer's symptoms. So can you just sum up how the study was conducted, what you found out, and like the protocol that was used?
Yeah, to the Alzheimer's and dementia study.
Yes.
Yeah, so we did a study with, they weren't Alzheimer's and dementia patients, they were TBI patients who had a high propensity to develop um, Alzheimer's and
Oh, okay.
dementia.
Okay.
And this was a later version of my creation at Johns Hopkins. Well, it was actually before Johns Hopkins, but Johns Hopkins used it. But that later version produced hippocampal growth in the subiculum and CA3 region. So that also coincided with direct improvements in executive functioning. So that was that study. But I would say that, even that stuff doesn't even touch kind of the depth of the effects that we're seeing, because what we opened in our center, we call it the third generation system, and we had a much better understanding of mechanism after we left Johns Hopkins with some experiments in blood flow and just some small n experiments that we did. And we really understood how to trigger the growth process in the brain, and that's what we do now.
So this latest, like the third generation, you still didn't have like big studies finalized on it, or do you have any like studies going on testing the latest generation model?
We have our own clinical trial. We're I don't even consider what we do. It's funny because the old neuroanimation stuff, that we did, it's just so behind what we're seeing and doing now that I don't even consider them really the same thing. It's similar in spirit, but what we were able to do now. So we are publishing, so we're gathering our evidence, and right now we show remarkable gains in Fugelmeyer far beyond anything. No one comes close. I mean, and not only that, but the granularity with which we're looking at motor recovery is no one's ever done this. we don't look at motor strengthening or improvements that are, you could argue, are strength improvements versus true dexterity improvements. We're looking at new movement, full stop. We're looking at, I can't move my finger, now I can move my finger. And so by hyper focusing on something that could only be the result of serious neuroplasticity, we're able to refine and tune our system for the maximum benefit of people out there who suffer these awful things. So no other group is doing anything even close. I think it's almost tragic, the mess that this industry is in, where you have 5 million different clinical trials with 5 million different types of specialists, and it's just a confusing story for people. But what we're doing is we're focusing on, you're a client, let's get you new movement. That's it.
Yeah.
And you can't move your wrist, let's get you moving your wrist. How? Well, let's do this, right? And so that's kind of where our focal point is.
Yeah, I know you touched on some of the success stories and the cases that you are seeing, and I'll also link to the blog for anyone who wants to read them. But I want to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
what is a surprising story? What is a heartwarming story? And what's something that really shocked you, like something that was really like you didn't expect seeing it,
Yeah,
that you can tell us about?
so first of all, we have a lot. It's hard to choose from. There's no single one. I'd say that in general, we have about 20%, 15 to 20% of our client stories are flat out miracles. I'd say the vast majority are life changing. Okay. That's how enormous it is. But the miracle, when I say miracle, I mean it almost in a scientific way, that it's just something that we cannot explain with current neurobiology. And two, this isn't supposed to happen, right? One case is very remarkable. She was a physicist at OSU, and she suffered a stroke about 2 years ago. Very, very debilitating cognitive dysfunction. Okay. So she couldn't concentrate. She had a kind of a intense brain fog that limited her ability to focus for more than 2 minutes. And she couldn't do complex math and physics. Like it was almost I don't know what, she couldn't express herself mathematically. It was a weird disorder, and she got TPA, but somehow had lingering cognitive deficits, like very significant deficits. So she came to our program at wit's end. It was like, I don't know. And we were just opening at the time, and we weren't really thinking about all this. So we were just like, it's worth a shot, I guess. And we tracked one of our COO, who's brilliant. He's an amazing person in the healthcare space. We're very lucky to have him. His name's Gaurav Gupta, Gigi. We call him Gigi. But Gigi was smart enough to really lay down the groundwork for really meticulous cognitive testing. Okay. So he's like, I was like, do we really need that? And he's like, no, we need it. And so we did this full battery of cognitive tests, and every day we were tracking, and we use a test that the US military uses. So it's very sensitive. And we noticed, so she went through our 12-week program. So we did 2 hours of neuroanimation a week, 2 days a week for 12 weeks. And and in the beginning, we see the impairment, but it's just this slow and steady improvement. So her scores when she got there were 230 out of 600, which is like non-functional for what she's doing, right? That's like a very low score.
She's a physicist.
Yeah. And that's like a score where, like, you can't really process things. It's impairment level score, right?
Yeah.
And it just started to go up slowly. And these deep subjective gains, she just slowly started to notice more and more and more. Week over week, they just layered. At about a month mark, she was like at 400 and something in her scores. And by the end of the program, she was at 600. And she was just lightning fast, a physicist again, total but we saw it from the data that we were collecting and the testing we were doing. It was very consistent and smooth, the increase. And the objective measurements coincided with very subjective reporting from her that, hey, I can do this now. Hey, I can do this now. Hey, I can do this now. She also had vision improvements, by the way. That was so we essentially gave her life back, right? This was a complete resolution. We had another woman, her name was Shelly. She came through our program, had debilitating balance disorder. And it was bizarre. Nobody could diagnose it or treat it. She's been a radiologist. It wasn't dizziness. It was just, she was unable to balance.
Mm-hmm.
She would fall like up to 30 times in a day. She had a walker. a wheelchair. She would fall in the walker, so she was wheelchair bound. And we have a video of her on the first day, not, she basically falls with the coach, her animation coach, like holding her up. And then you see her at the end of 15 days, she's like walking, sitting up. I mean, it's insane. So she put the wheelchair in her basement. She doesn't use it anymore. So those are about 15-20% of the people have gains that drastic they're basically like kind of modern day miracles. That's not to say the other ones aren't meaningful. The other ones are deeply meaningful. Like giving a stroke client new movement is right there. If you're unable to move your thumb, and then you can move your thumb, and you couldn't pick up objects, now you can pick up objects. It's a little bit of the Wild West, because most of our clients come back because they see these gains and they add to them. And our goal as a company is we want to get people 100% normal, and that's our vision. And what's crazy is we're seeing it with people. We're seeing it get to that point. It takes multiple we call them boot camps, right? But the Fugelmeyer gains stay. So you see the gain, and we come back the next time, it stays. So they're layering on top of each other, to get to where they want to go.
Yeah, so that's something I always emphasize. Like sometimes we leave patients at the functional level, like yeah, just like independent, caring a little bit for themselves, and like that's good. But giving them their humanity back, like I remember the case that of the patient who stopped dreaming and then started dreaming again. Like I can imagine for someone looking from afar, it's like yeah, but like some people need to walk, and yeah, it's important, but that's a basic part of our humanity as well, like being able to
Yeah.
dream, to think, to overthink stuff. Like those are basic humanity aspects that neurological patients are usually deprived of, and we are just looking at their functional part.
Correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're referring to two clients now, or two or three of them have reported this, that they couldn't dream after their injury. They stopped dreaming, and that returned after. So I think it's very clear, right? We have hippocampal volume growth. There's some hippocampal dysfunction. All brain injury clients suffer the risk of midbrain atrophy because of the neurovascular biome changes from the injury. So even if the injury isn't in the hippocampus, because the vascular density of the hippocampus is higher than other parts in the brain, it has a much higher energy demand. So those overall vascular changes end up creating an atrophy of that area, and that atrophy causes a lot of problems. So we're able to directly address that by growing that area, which would, in theory, basically reverse the atrophy and reverse the damage. And that's why we see these incredible effects.
Yeah, that's amazing. So besides, I know how the most important part is, or the most important population is those people who had those like brain injuries and sudden cut off function, or like being back to their normal lives. But I can also see how this tracks into wellness in general.
Yeah.
It's we are all big on brain health. Some people,
Yeah.
like for example, long COVID cases, people are suffering of brain
Brain
fog.
fog. Yeah.
We talk a lot about brain fog with menopause in women. We are a generation that actually our brains are being consumed by
Yeah.
scrolling, by technology, by consuming, by watching. So, what do you think? Did you try, or is it hard to measure, like on people who don't suffer direct neurological damage?
You're right.
So, did you try any, like, what would be the effect for let's say normal people or people who don't suffer
Yeah,
a neurological
it's a
damage?
huge, right. So it's a great question. So a good number of our clients are older adults who simply want to live again.
Hmm.
And you see kind of this neurological rebirth. It's incredible. And it's all word of mouth. We discovered this market because it just kind of spread on its own. And what it is, it's like my mom, she's sitting in a chair. Like, older people have beautiful, wonderful life to live, our older adults. And most ancient societies cherished older adults. Like, why aren't our elders sitting there and telling their wisdom and stories to children every day, right? And more often than not, they're sitting in a window and just letting themselves decay and vegetate and look out, And so they go through the program, and it's like life just gets restored. So we see these massive cognitive gains. We had one client that just came through, same sort of thing, like she couldn't balance. Now she's walking, she's talking much more actively. Her cognitive scores went up. She's interacting with her family. It's that live again that, it is neurological in some sense because you have this age-related decline, but it looks like what we're doing is just adding years to their lives, right? It looks like what we're doing is reversing that, and people just want to live again. We actually call it our live again pillar, and it's something to do to strengthen that. But that still is a active problem, right? You're looking at someone who's kind of deteriorating, and you want to reverse that problem. What you're talking about more is like how I use it. So I use the therapy. I use it twice a week, and it does make you hyper perform. It's like a cheat thing. It's like cheating almost. You just, I can give my own personal experience from using it that the best way a client told me this, and that this is the best way to describe it. It's like you can think in paragraphs instead of sentences. So it's just having this cognitive advantage of like being able to, to think through things in a much greater level of depth and clarity and longevity, in sort of a time span than you normally can. It's a massive mood uplifter. People report motivational effects that are just off the charts. So that market though is different. There's a lot of charlatans in that market.
Hmm.
Strap red lights to your head or whatever, where less than 0.5% of light would even penetrate there's a lot of snake oil in that market. And we have such strong evidence for the client gains that we're publishing that we've published already. We have 6 peer-reviewed studies out there, right? Even on the older stuff. So we want to stay away from those people. But for the healthy market, for like brain longevity and just hyper performance, I think that will eventually enter into that, and promote it that way.
Yeah, and my observation for this one, I don't know if that's right, but when we are talking about the healthy population, we don't need the advanced monitoring cameras or yes, so
No, you do. It's the same thing.
same thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's the same type of therapy. It's
Yeah.
just a different, there's no difference in the therapy.
Hmm.
It's just a different client coming in for it.
Yeah, so different objectives,
Hmm.
but you still need the same setup. So we still need to go to New Albany to get NeuroAnimation so far.
Yeah, we're expanding very, very rapidly. So we open in Kentucky,
Hmm.
um, this month, actually, I think, in February. And then our plan is to be in every state by mid 2027.
Hmm.
So, and
Yeah.
yeah,
So for therapists listening to this podcast, this therapy is not intended to become something they can add to
no,
their
it's not,
clinics.
it's totally orthogonal from we are not rehab. We
Yeah.
are a brain growth mechanism. That's what we
Okay.
are. Right. So we grow brain cells. That's what we do.
Yeah. So people need to go to the source. Like they go to the
Yeah.
neuroanimation
Yeah.
wellness.
Yeah, yeah, and rehab is super important in its own lane. It has a lot of our clients, they're going to rehab while they're doing this, right?
Yes.
Well, some of them do that. Some of them don't, some of them just do neuroanimation, but I think if a rehab therapist is not seeing strong enough results with their client, that would be something that they should refer their clients to us.
Yeah. So it's like a supplementary, complementary, or a standalone, depending on the case and the patient's preference. Yeah, that's great to know. So just something that's like to close from your perspective as a neuroscientist and someone who studied the brain extensively for the last decade, what would you have like an advice for people working with neurological patients? Obviously, neuroanimation is brain growth and neuroplasticity, and like real neuroplasticity. We're not talking about like the fake results that get referred to neuroplasticity.
Hmm.
And I know that this is the bulk of the importance of this experience. But like aside from that, what would be something you would tell people that are caring for neurological patients to take care of, to look at, that could help them in their journeys?
I mean, I know this, it seems self-serving, but the evidence is so strong that the best thing they can do is send them to us. If
Okay.
you're like, there's no other way to put it, right?
Yeah.
If you have a patient who has a neurological deficit caused by TBI or stroke or whatever, I think the, the becoming a client of our wellness program is one of the best possible things you could do for them, if not the best. Outside of that, it would be diet and sleep.
Hmm.
I think high quality omega-3, salmon, eating fish, spinach, walnuts, right? Blueberries. There's a lot of importance in neurologically beneficial diets. I mean, that's very underappreciated, right? Sleep, regular exercise, lifestyle, those things make a huge dent in it. And then with neuroanimation, you can do miracles, you know?
Yeah. Did you notice it helped people with their sleep?
Yes.
You know, like, yeah, that's
We have a
something.
lot, but again, we do track the anecdotal cases. We don't make claims on them, but we can talk about them. We can say, hey, look,
Yes.
we had 8 clients here and they all reported that they had sleep problem resolution. Right? Uh, the physicist I talked about, she said the days she does the therapy, she was sleeping very, very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what this podcast is about. So it's not PubMed. I do appreciate like real claims and arguments, but also we are looking into the lived experience of what people are saying and the subjective perspective of people and of patients and the people working with them. So I appreciate you for this. And of course, like anecdotal evidence has its place. It's not like the evil thing.
Mhm.
So thank you so much, Dr. Omar. For anyone watching now, what's the best place to go to learn more about neuroanimation?
Just go to our website and there's a contact form, and you'll get you'll be able to schedule, an interview with our specialist and then sign up. We have a small wait list, but we're growing our centers too, so that should be alleviated when we open our doors.
Yeah, so congratulations again on the expansion, on the awards, and on the results.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you are doing. Thank you for being here with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hamsa.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye bye.
Bye.